In the middle of the forest, Joe runs away in fear as a mysterious figure chases him. Unfortunately, Joe trips and falls and the creature catches him. It turns out to be a vampire, who immediately starts drinking Joe's blood. Just then, the sun comes out and the vampire dies and turns to ash, but Joe also burns his hand, meaning he is now a vampire. He starts moving around to hide in the shade of trees and eventually finds a pile of logs, so he grabs a blanket and covers himself and runs into a nearby shed for protection. There, he vomits as the transformation ends. Meanwhile, Stan wakes up in his lovely home and has breakfast with his parents. Suddenly a glass falls and his mother becomes seriously ill and the house falls apart. Then his father takes a gun and kills himself in front of his son. Soon after, Stan wakes up and reveals that his current home is not in good condition. His parents have passed away, so he lives with his grandfather Ellis, an ex-soldier who constantly yells at him and always expects to be called sir. If Stan even tries to ignore him, Ellis will push him against a wall to threaten him for complaining about today's youth. When Stan gets to school, he is told that the shed belongs to Ellis' house. Stan is riding his bike when the gang that harassed him at school comes by, riding like crazy, and tries to run him down. Stan manages to dodge them, but his distraction causes him to crash into a police truck. Sheriff Dorney is understanding, but the deputy is furious and reminds him that he is turning 18. This means no more juvenile detention or second chances. He can finally stop Stan for good. At school, Stan's best friend Dahmer hears the gang talking bad about him and he insults them. This angers Marble, Pitt and Ozzy, and they quickly fight in the hallway. Roxy and Stan immediately stand up for him and Stan almost starts a fight, but the fight is broken up when a teacher takes them to their classroom. After school, Dahmer says he's had enough of it all and that one day he'll finally break up and destroy the group. He also complains about Roxy, who used to be part of their group of friends, but now hangs out with the popular kids. But Stan still can't shake his feelings. Later, at home, Stan hides in the attic looking at pictures of his parents while listening to emo music and playing with a knife. After cutting the grass, he throws the knife perfectly at the target. Ellis then orders him to mow the lawn. As he goes outside, the dog starts barking at the shed, but Stan doesn't take it as a warning and goes into the shed anyway. While searching for the lawnmower, he finds teeth on the table. Just then, Joe comes out of hiding and tries to attack him, causing Stan to accidentally open the window. The scorching sun holds Joe back and Stan rushes out of the shed to get the dog, thinking he just saw a drug addict. Stan yells at Joe to come out, and when he doesn't, he sends the dog after him. As soon as he steps inside, the dog yelps and makes a loud noise before its head is thrown out of its cage. Stan runs into the house to grab a knife and Ellis comes to scold him, so Stan tells him about the dog and the intruder. Ellis calls the dog for confirmation and goes outside to confront the perpetrator, not listening to Stan when he says they should call the police. The old man is devastated at the sight of his dead dog and hands Stan his stick before entering the shed with a wooden stick, ready to kill. After a few minutes of silence, Ellis announces that the place is empty except for the dog's body and begins screaming. The violent sounds resound, and when they end, Ellis bursts through a door in a state of chaos. Stan tries to help him, but Joe drags Ellis into the hangar and slams the door to kill him. Panicking, Stan uses the dog's chain to lock the door while his grandfather's blood flows under the wood. He then returns home and drinks Ellis beer, something he is not normally allowed to do. He considers calling the police, but he is on probation and thinks they will blame him for this, so he drops the phone and starts sealing the cabin properly so Joe can't escape and hurt anyone else. That night, someone tries to open Stan's bedroom door. Thinking it might be Ellis, Stan leaves the room but finds nothing in the hallway. The electricity is not working and he hears Ellis whispering his name. He goes to check his grandfather's room and is surprised to hear Ellis yelling his name from behind, but no one is there yet. Now the whispers are coming from downstairs, so Ellis follows them until he sees the shed lights up and the voice gets deeper. He prepares to open the shed and the voice screams that Stan wants to kill him before the boy wakes up in his room. The next day at school, Roxy tries to talk to Stan, but is interrupted by Marble, who asks her to help him with his homework later. Roxy knows that Stan is judging her for dating Marble for her behavior, but she admits that she only did it to survive her senior year without being harassed. However, Stan believes that these decisions do not stop in high school and will follow her throughout her life. He then tries to confess what happened to Ellis, but they are interrupted by Dahmer, which upsets Stan, so he leaves alone. As Dahmer leaves the school, the group starts insulting him again and Dahmer gives them the middle finger. Angry, the trio starts chasing him through the woods. At home, Stan notices the barn door shaking and grabs a stick before approaching. Suddenly, Joe punches a hole in the door and grabs Stan by the neck, revealing his monstrous face. The sun is about to burn Joe's hand, so Stan easily escapes and Joe goes back into hiding. Soon after, Dahmer comes to bleeding and yelling at Stan for leaving him alone. Stan interrupts to explain that Ellis and his dog are dead and that there is a monster in the barn. Dahmer doesn't believe him and Stan agrees to show him, but first he gets some stuff to plug the hole in the door. Suddenly, Dahmer starts hearing his name and as he approaches, Joe appears at the door. Stan immediately rushes to plug the hole and Dahmer helps him hammer in a nail. Dahmer then gets excited because he thinks they can use the monster to kill the group, but Stan thinks this is going too far and forbids him from committing any more murders. That night, Stan goes to bed with a knife and watches an old vampire movie to learn their weakness. They are burned by sunlight, destroying their black, decapitated hearts. Suddenly, a woman comes out of a naughty poster on the wall and sits on Stan to do naughty things to him, but she suddenly turns into an ugly vampire and bites him, waking Stan up. While searching for his shoes, he looks under the bed and finds the vampire again, but it is also a nightmare. Annoyed, he tears the poster off the wall. He then climbs onto the roof of the barn and starts cutting holes in the roof so that the sunlight can hurt Joe, but there is still enough shade for him to hide. Later, Sheriff Dorney comes to Stan to ask about Ellis, and Stan tells him that he is out, which Dorney finds strange because his car is still in the driveway. Stan swears that he doesn't know where Ellis is and blames the old man's drinking habits. Dorney explains that the family up the road killed all the rabbits, so the husband went to look for the culprit but never came back. When she shows him a picture of the guy, Stan recognizes Joe but says he has never seen him before. A suspicious Dorney insists on driving Stan to school, and as he gets ready, she sees Ellis's cane on the floor. At school, Roxy worries about Stan's injury, but the moment is interrupted by a sexist remark from Marble. Stan stands up for him and Marble tells him that he can have Roxy, calling her a careless second. Enraged, Stan begins punching Marble and throws him to the ground, only to hit him even harder several times. A professor comes to hold him up and tells him that they are setting up a meeting with Ellis, but since they can't find him over the phone, they sent Dorney to get him. Fearing for the sheriff's life, Stan runs out of the school to arrest him, not noticing that Marble is trying to follow him. At Ellis' house, Dorney tries ringing the doorbell, but no one answers. Soon she hears a noise coming from the shed and goes to investigate. She is startled by something banging on the door, but then she hears Ellis' voice calling for help. She pulls the lock, but before she can open it, Stan arrives. Dorney points a gun at him and tries to tell her that it was Joe in the shed, not Ellis, but she doesn't believe him. She then opens the door to save Ellis, only to be jumped by Joe. He bites her neck and raises his hand to waste bullets in the air, then rips her arm off before dragging her into S' warehouse to feed her. Worse still, Marble suddenly appears and starts beating Stan. After a few punches and kicks, he pulls his hand away to finish the job, but freezes when he hears gunshots. It is Dahmer, who shoots Dorney's gun again to force Marble to surrender. Stan tries to calm him down, but Dahmer panics and threatens to hurt him if he interferes. He then begins to insult Marble, forcing him to admit that he is a chicken before sending him back to the coop. Stan's warnings are once again ignored and Marble moves normally at first, but he begins to panic when he sees Dorney's arm on the ground. Marble begins to apologize, taking responsibility for all the incidents at school, but Dahmer tells him to go to the barn. Soon after, they hear the sound of Marble being tortured to death. Enraged, Stan begins to struggle with Dahmer for the gun as he screams at him. However, a scream from Marble distracts Stan and Dahmer shoots him with the gun, knocking him unconscious. A moment later, Roxy wakes Stan. Stan is nowhere to be found and the hangar door is open. Roxy says she doesn't see anyone around and begins to panic when she sees the arm on the ground. Stan then goes into the warehouse to investigate and finds Marble's brass knuckles on the floor. In the darkness in the background, he sees Marble standing, but her corpse falls and reveals that Dahmer is now a vampire. Dahmer explains that Joe is away for now but will return later to finish Stan off. He begins to monologue as he approaches, ignoring the small flashes of light that burn his body. Roxy then sees him and screams, so Dahmer uses the distraction to try to attack Stan, who immediately stabs him with a stick and puts his arm in the sunlight and pushes him away. Stan then closes the shed and hugs Roxy, but is taken aback by Dahmer's outburst. He tries to apologize as the sun burns him, and Stan runs to cover him with a blanket, but it's too late. Stan then tells Roxy everything and they start reading for the night. They put Stan's body in the shed and go into the house, sealing all the windows and doors and lighting a fire in the fireplace. They also make stakes out of sticks and collect as many knives as they can. Stan can't help but blame himself for the whole thing, but Roxy promises that it wasn't his fault and they kiss. As night falls, Joe is discovered hiding underground in the woods and is only just coming out. At home, Pitt and Ozzy knock on the door asking where Marble is. Roxy and Stan try to tell them to go away. Ozzy becomes concerned when a figure appears in the darkness and tries to warn Pitt, who continues to argue. Suddenly, an arm reached out and pulled Ozzy up to the roof to feed him, to let his blood flow. Pitt finally understood and the pair had no choice but to let him in. By then, Joe had destroyed the electrical box. Stan thought they would be safe there because they had sealed all the doors, only to realize that they were not working in the attic. They began to hear noises upstairs and went to investigate, splitting up so that everyone could check a different room at the same time. Stan finds no intruders, but he does find Ellis' gun. Roxy worries as she checks under Stan's bed, but she also finds nothing. Meanwhile, Pitt finds an open window and quickly closes it, not noticing the broken glass on the floor. When he turns around, an Aussie vampire growls at him. Soon after, Roxy is attacked and taken to the attic. Stan runs to help but is stopped by Ozzy and Pitt, who are also vampires. Stan rushes into a room and locks the door with a chair to find bullets, while Pitt breaks the door down with an axe. After the gun is loaded, Stan puts it in Pitt's mouth and shoots both vampires at once. In the attic, Roxy is about to be beaten by Joe, but Stan stops her. He fires and the first bullet wounds Joe's arm, but he can't shoot again because Joe is quick and grabs the gun from him. Stan then puts the axe on Joe's shoulder, but he is knocked down. Joe pulls out the axe and jumps on Stan to start strangling him, but Roxy grabs the gun and shoots him as Stan is knocked to the ground. The shot only wounds Joe in the face and the gun is now out of bullets. Joe attempts to attack Roxy, but Stan then yells at him and throws the knife he left earlier at her, but Joe dodges it and the knife hits Rosie in the shoulder. Joe then tries to strangle Stan again and Roxy gets hold of the axe, which she uses to decapitate Joe in one swift motion. Now that it's all over, the couple puts all the bodies in the shed and sets it on fire. They wake up in the morning in the car and realize they left the trunk unlocked, where something moves to open the trunk. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, leave a comment about your favorite movie, and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.